Nala was always the one who caught everyone's eye in a crowd. Her beauty was striking in its naturalness and harmony, as if nature itself had taken special care in creating her. She possessed long, thick, glossy hair the color of black obsidian, cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. Her eyes, deep and penetrating, like two sapphire crystals, reflected the entire spectrum of the blue sky. Her skin was flawless, smooth, even, with a warm tone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. But this was only what met the eye. Every morning, when Nala looked in the mirror, she saw only her outward appearance, but not the person she was inside. To the world, she was an ideal, and that ideal had become her prison. She could choose from countless admirers, yet none of them saw the real her. They saw only the face that attracted them, the body they desired, but none of them tried to look deeper, to discover her thoughts, fears, or desires. Nala was well known in her town. She often attended parties and social events where she was always surrounded by adoring people. Men would fall at her feet, offering their hearts and wealth, while women envied her beauty, trying to imitate her by buying the same dresses, copying her hairstyles. Nala felt the weight of every gaze, every whisper, but instead of bringing her joy, it only brought her pain. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was a beautiful but empty vessel. She had everything: fame, wealth, attention, but she lacked the most important thing: love. True, genuine love, based not on appearance but on mutual respect, understanding, and a deep connection. All her admirers would tell her how beautiful she was, but no one asked her what she thought or felt. No one was interested in her dreams, her goals, her fears. In private, Nala often wondered, what if I were different? What if my looks were not so remarkable? Would anyone still love me? These thoughts haunted her, especially on those nights when she was alone in her lavish but empty home. She would sit in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection, searching for something beyond the perfect features staring back at her. She knew she was more than just a pretty face, but it seemed the world had decided that was all she was. As time passed, the emptiness inside her grew. Nala became more and more disillusioned with the endless stream of suitors and admirers who only cared about her looks. She began to withdraw from the social scene, tired of the shallow interactions that left her feeling even more isolated. The constant compliments that once made her feel special now felt like chains, binding her to a life she no longer wanted. One evening, after another meaningless party where she had been showered with empty praise, Nala found herself walking through the dark streets of her town, her mind heavy with thoughts. The night was quiet, the air cool, and the stars above seemed to twinkle with a cold indifference. She wandered aimlessly, her heart aching for something real, something she had never found, despite all the attention she received. As she walked, she came across an old, decrepit building at the edge of town. It was a place she had never noticed before, though she had passed by it many times. The building was covered in ivy, its windows broken, and the paint on the walls was peeling. There was something about it that drew her in, a feeling that perhaps within these forgotten walls lay an answer to the questions that tormented her. She hesitated at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest, but curiosity and a strange sense of hope pushed her forward. She entered the building, the creaking door closing behind her with a soft thud. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of age and neglect. Dust particles floated in the dim light that filtered through the broken windows. Nala wandered through the empty halls, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She felt a strange connection to this place, as if it mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. As she moved deeper into the building, she found herself in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a mirror, much like the one she stared into every morning, but this one was different. Its surface was tarnished, the glass cracked in places, but it still reflected her image. She stood before the mirror, her reflection distorted by the cracks and imperfections in the glass. For a moment she saw herself as others saw her: beautiful, perfect. But as she looked closer, the reflection began to shift. The cracks seemed to reach out, distorting her features, blending her perfect image into something less defined, less flawless. She wasn't frightened by the change. Instead, she felt a strange sense of peace, as if the mirror was showing her something she had always known deep down. Nala realized that her beauty, the thing that everyone admired, was also the thing that had imprisoned her. It was a mask, hiding her true self from the world and, worse, from herself. The distorted image in the mirror was a reflection of her inner turmoil, the struggle between who she was and who she was perceived to be. For the first time in her life, Nala understood that if she wanted to find true love, she needed to shed the mask. She needed to find a way to reveal her true self, to let go of the beauty that had defined her for so long. But how could she do that in a world that only valued her for her looks? The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with a sense of purpose. She was no longer content to live in the shadow of her own beauty. She wanted something real, something more. Nala left the building that night with a new determination. She would find a way to change, to break free from the expectations that had been placed upon her. She didn't know how she would do it or what the consequences would be, but she knew she had to try. For the first time in her life, she was willing to risk everything: her fame, her wealth, her status, for the chance to find true love. As she walked back home, the stars above seemed a little brighter, the air a little warmer. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She was ready to discover who she really was, beyond the beauty that had defined her for so long. And so Nala set out on a journey, not of physical distance, but of self-discovery. A journey that would lead her to change her life in ways she had never imagined, all in the pursuit of a love that saw beyond the surface, into the depths of her soul. The days that followed Nala's decision were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. The realization that she was ready to let go of the beauty that had defined her life was both liberating and terrifying. She knew that she had to make a change, but the thought of actually doing it left her feeling anxious and uncertain. It wasn't just her appearance that she was questioning, it was everything that came with it: her identity, her sense of self-worth, and her place in the world. Nala began to withdraw from the social circles that once brought her so much attention. The parties, the glamorous events, the endless parade of admirers, they all felt hollow now. Like a series of performances she no longer had the energy to participate in. She found herself spending more time alone, avoiding the mirrors that had once been her constant companions. Every reflection was a reminder of the mask she wore, and every compliment felt like a weight pressing down on her, suffocating her true self. As she distanced herself from her old life, Nala started to explore the city in ways she never had before. She wandered through quiet neighborhoods, visited small, hidden cafes, and spent hours in libraries, losing herself in books that spoke of deeper meanings and inner beauty. She found solace in the pages of these books, where characters were valued not for their looks but for their hearts and minds. It was a world she longed to belong to, a world where she could be seen for who she really was. But as much as she yearned for change, Nala couldn't escape the fear that came with it. What would happen if she altered her appearance? Would people still care about her? Would she become invisible, just another face in the crowd? The thought of losing the attention she had grown so accustomed to was daunting. She had always been the center of the room, the one everyone wanted to be around. What if that all disappeared? These thoughts haunted her, keeping her awake at night as she lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She would often find herself at the mirror, her hands tracing the contours of her face, wondering what it would be like to look different. Sometimes she imagined herself with scars, with features less defined, less perfect. She imagined the freedom that might come with such a change: the ability to walk down the street without being noticed, to speak to someone without them being distracted by her looks. But with that freedom came the fear of rejection. She had always been admired, always wanted. What if, without her beauty, she found herself alone? Nala knew that her decision would have consequences, but she couldn't ignore the deep longing inside her for something more, something real. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for the surface image that everyone else saw. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the city, Nala found herself at the edge of town, near the same old building where she had made her initial decision. She had been walking aimlessly, her mind a jumble of thoughts, when she realized where her feet had taken her. The building stood silent, its broken windows and ivy-covered walls bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She approached it slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The memory of her last visit was fresh in her mind, and she felt a strange pull toward the place, as if it held the answers she was seeking. Nala pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of dust and age greeting her like an old friend. This time, she didn't wander aimlessly through the halls. She knew exactly where she was going. The small, dimly lit room with the tarnished mirror awaited her, just as she had left it. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection, and for the first time she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The image in the glass was still distorted, the cracks still present, but they no longer frightened her. Instead, they felt like a part of her, a reflection of the inner struggle she was facing. Nala placed her hand on the mirror, feeling the cool glass under her fingertips. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the weight of the decision she was about to make. It wasn't just about changing her appearance, it was about reclaiming her life, her identity. She wanted to be free from the expectations that had been placed upon her, free to find love on her own terms. When she opened her eyes again, she knew what she had to do. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but it no longer held her back. She was ready to take the first step toward change. Over the next few days, Nala sought out someone who could help her with her transformation. It wasn't easy, she had to be discreet, careful not to let anyone from her old life find out what she was planning. Eventually, she found an old, reclusive artist who was known for his unconventional methods and his ability to see beyond the surface. His name was Jaro, and he lived in a small, cluttered studio on the outskirts of the city. Jaro was an eccentric man, with wild hair and paint-stained clothes. His eyes were sharp, filled with a wisdom that came from years of observing the world around him. When Nala walked into his studio, he didn't react with the awe or admiration she was used to. Instead, he looked at her with curiosity, as if trying to understand why someone like her would seek him out.
"What brings you here?"
Jaro asked, his voice calm and measured. Nala hesitated for a moment, then replied,
"I want to change. I want to look different, to be different."
Jaro studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
"You're not the first to ask for such a thing. But tell me, why do you want this?"
Nala took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly.
"I'm tired of being seen only for my beauty. I want to find someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I look like. I need to know if that's even possible."
Jaro's expression softened, and he motioned for her to sit.
"You seek something that many people never find. True love is rare, and even rarer when you hide behind a mask, even if that mask is your own face."
Nala nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat.
"I don't want to hide anymore."
Jaro smiled faintly.
"Very well. I can help you, but you must understand that this change will not be easy. You will lose what you have now, and there will be no going back. Are you prepared for that?"
Nala met his gaze, her resolve hardening.
"I am."
And so, the process began. Jaro worked with Nala over several weeks, using his skills to alter her appearance in subtle but significant ways. He didn't simply make her less beautiful, he made her look different, more ordinary, with features that were less striking, but still uniquely her own. It was a gradual transformation, each session bringing her closer to the person she wanted to be. As Nala watched her reflection change day by day, she felt a mix of emotions: fear, excitement, and a deep sense of liberation. She was shedding the skin of the person she had been, and in doing so, she was discovering a new sense of self. The mirror no longer showed the perfect face that had once defined her. Instead, it showed a face that was real, flawed, and human. When the transformation was complete, Nala looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone new, someone she was just beginning to get to know. Her beauty was still there, but it was different now, less imposing, less overwhelming. She felt like she was finally seeing herself for the first time, without the distortion of others' expectations. Nala thanked Jaro and left his studio with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer the woman who had been trapped by her own beauty. She was free to live her life on her own terms, to find the love she had always longed for. But as she stepped out into the world with her new face, she knew that her journey was far from over. The real challenge lay ahead, finding someone who would see her for who she truly was, beyond the surface, beyond the mask. And she was ready to face it, no matter what it took. Nala's transformation was complete. The face that had once captivated the attention of everyone who saw her was now different, less striking, more ordinary. Her beauty was still there, but it was no longer the overwhelming force it had once been. Instead, it was subtle, almost hidden, like a delicate flower in a vast field. She looked at herself in the mirror and felt a mixture of emotions: relief, fear, and an overwhelming sense of anticipation for what was to come. Leaving Jaro's studio for the last time, Nala felt a strange sense of liberation. She had shed the skin that had trapped her in a life of superficiality, but now she was stepping into the unknown. The world outside felt different, more vast and uncertain. As she walked through the streets, she noticed that people no longer stared at her the way they used to. The glances she did receive were fleeting, indifferent. For the first time in her life, Nala was just another face in the crowd. At first, this anonymity was a relief. She could move through the city without the constant attention that had once followed her every step. She visited shops, cafes, and parks, blending in with the flow of people around her. No one stopped to admire her or to shower her with compliments. For the first time, Nala felt the freedom of being unseen. But with that freedom came a new kind of loneliness. The interactions she had with others were polite, but distant. People no longer went out of their way to talk to her or to win her favor. The world that had once revolved around her now seemed to move on without noticing her at all. Nala realized that her beauty had been a double-edged sword. While it had brought her unwanted attention, it had also opened doors for her, allowing her to connect with people, even if those connections had been shallow. As days turned into weeks, Nala found herself grappling with this new reality. The life she had once known was gone, and with it, the constant stream of admirers who had filled her days. The parties, the invitations, the endless compliments, they had all disappeared. Nala had wanted to be seen for who she truly was, but now she wondered if anyone would ever take the time to look beyond the surface. One day, while sitting alone in a small, quiet cafe, Nala overheard a conversation at a nearby table. Two women were discussing the latest social event in the city, a glamorous gala that had taken place the night before. They spoke of the beautiful dresses, the elegant decor, and the stunning people who had attended. Nala listened in silence, realizing that she had once been part of that world, but now she was on the outside looking in. A pang of sadness struck her as she sipped her coffee. She had given up that life for a chance at something real, something meaningful. But had she made the right choice? The doubts that had been simmering in the back of her mind began to surface. What if she never found the love she was searching for? What if she had sacrificed everything only to end up alone? These thoughts plagued Nala as she continued her new life, trying to find her place in a world that no longer recognized her. She applied for a job at a small bookstore, hoping to fill her days with something meaningful. The owner, an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, hired her without hesitation. He didn't seem to care about her looks or her past. He was simply happy to have someone to help him run the shop. Working at the bookstore brought Nala a sense of peace she hadn't expected. The days were quiet, filled with the soft rustle of pages turning and the scent of old books. The customers who came in were mostly regulars, people who loved to read and who valued the stories within the pages more than the appearances of those around them. Nala found herself drawn to these people, enjoying the simplicity of their interactions. One afternoon, a man walked into the store, and Nala noticed him immediately. He was different from the others, tall, with dark hair and a serious expression. He moved with purpose, scanning the shelves as if searching for something specific. Nala watched him out of the corner of her eye, curious about what had brought him to the shop. After a few minutes, the man approached the counter, holding a worn copy of a book.
"Do you have this in a newer edition?" he asked, his voice low and calm.
Nala looked at the book in his hands. It was an old classic, one of her favorites. She smiled slightly, shaking her head.
I'm afraid that's the only copy we have right now. But it's a good one.
The man looked at her for a moment, then nodded.
"I'll take it," he said, placing the book on the counter.
As Nala rang up the sale, she couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity with this man, though she was certain they had never met. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, that intrigued her. She handed him the book, their fingers brushing slightly as he took it from her.
Thank you. Thank you.
He said, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. Nala felt a slight flutter in her chest, something she hadn't experienced in a long time.
You're welcome, she replied, her voice soft.
The man nodded again and left the store, the bell above the door jingling softly as it closed behind him. Nala watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had felt a connection, however brief, and it left her both excited and anxious. Had he noticed her? Seen something in her beyond the surface? In the days that followed, Nala found herself thinking about the man more often than she cared to admit. She wondered who he was, what he did, and whether he would return to the store. She didn't know why she was so drawn to him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their brief interaction had meant something. Weeks passed, and Nala settled into her routine at the bookstore. She enjoyed the quiet simplicity of her days, but the loneliness still lingered. The connections she made with customers were pleasant, but fleeting. She longed for something deeper, for someone to truly see her. Then, one evening, as she was closing up the store, the door opened, and the man walked in again. He looked just as serious as before, but there was a warmth in his eyes when he saw her. Nala's heart skipped a beat as she greeted him.
Back for more books?
She asked, trying to keep her tone light. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that made her heart flutter again.
Yes.
He said.
But I'm also here to see you.
Nala's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected that.
To see me.
The man nodded, stepping closer to the counter.
I've been thinking about you.
He admitted.
I don't usually do this, but there's something about you that I can't ignore.
Nala felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside her.
I've been thinking about you too,
she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile widened slightly, and he leaned against the counter, his gaze never leaving hers.
I'm Elias.
He said, holding out his hand.
Nala?
She replied, shaking his hand, her own trembling slightly. Elias didn't let go immediately, his touch warm and reassuring.
Nala, would you like to have dinner with me sometime?
Nala's heart raced as she considered his offer. This was what she had been searching for, someone who saw her, who wanted to know her. But the fear of rejection, of opening herself up, still lingered. She had changed her appearance to find someone who could love her for who she was, but now that the moment was here, she found herself hesitating. But looking into Elias's eyes, she saw something that gave her the courage to take the next step. There was no judgment, no expectations, just a genuine interest in her. It was enough to make her say yes.
I'd like that,
she said, her voice steady. Elias's smile was warm and genuine, and he squeezed her hand gently before letting go.
Great. How about tomorrow night?
Nala nodded, feeling a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time.
Tomorrow night it is.
As Elias left the store, Nala felt a wave of relief and anticipation wash over her. This was the start of something new, something real. She had taken the first step toward finding the love she had always longed for, and she was ready to see where it would lead. The next evening, Nala prepared for her date with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She dressed simply, choosing a modest outfit that reflected the person she had become, someone who valued substance over style. When Elias arrived to pick her up, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was right, she told herself. This was what she had been waiting for. Their dinner was pleasant, filled with easy conversation and shared laughter. Elias was attentive, asking her about her life, her thoughts, her dreams. For the first time in a long time, Nala felt truly seen, not as an object of beauty, but as a person with depth and complexity. She found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else. As the evening came to a close, Elias walked her back to her apartment. They stood at the door, the night air cool and crisp around them. Nala felt a flutter of nervousness, as she looked up at him, unsure of what to expect. Elias smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile, and leaned down to kiss her cheek.
I had a wonderful time tonight,
he said softly. Nala smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest.
So did I.
Elias hesitated for a moment, then took her hand in his.
I'd like to see you again, Nala.
Nala's heart swelled with emotion. This was what she had been searching for, someone who saw her for who she was, beyond the surface. She squeezed his hand gently, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time.
I'd like that too,
she replied. As Elias walked away, Nala watched him go, her heart filled with a sense of peace and happiness. She had taken a risk, changed her life in ways she had never imagined, but it was all worth it. She was finally on the path to finding the love she had always longed for, a love that went beyond appearances and touched the deepest parts of her soul. After Nala made the decision to change her appearance, her life changed dramatically. The changes she made were much more complicated than she had imagined. Her body, once the epitome of beauty, now looked completely different. She no longer attracted admiring glances, heard compliments at every turn, or felt envious stares. At first it seemed liberating to Nala. She could finally get rid of the constant pressure and expectations that her appearance had placed on her. She no longer had to conform to the image of a perfect beauty, constantly looking after herself, afraid to show even the slightest flaw. Now she could be herself, the real her, without fear of judgment or disappointment from others. However, Nala soon realized that along with the disappearance of her former appearance, she lost many other things as well. The people who used to surround her suddenly became indifferent. Those who had previously never missed a chance to say hello to her, compliment her, or tried to strike up a conversation, now didn't notice her. They passed by as if she didn't exist at all. It was especially painful to realize that even close acquaintances had stopped showing interest in her. Friends who used to enjoy spending time with her, discussing the latest fashion news or planning weekend getaways with her, now seemed to have lost interest in her. Nala tried to maintain her old relationships, but the conversations became more and more strained, and every day an unbridgeable gap grew between her and her surroundings. She realized that many people were only with her because of her beauty. Beauty attracted like a magnet, providing her with attention and recognition, but as soon as it disappeared, people began to drift away. Nala realized that her previous relationships had been superficial, and it hurt her deeply. She had to come to terms with the fact that she had become invisible to those who had once been her entourage. Each day brought new challenges. Her old admirers no longer gave her flowers or asked her out on dates. In public places, Nala no longer felt the admiring stares. Instead, she watched the attention of others shift to other people, to those who met the standards of beauty. Although Nala realized that looks no longer defined her life, it was not easy to cope. Doubts and fears began to engulf her mind. She asked herself questions to which she could find no answers. Was she right to make such a drastic decision? Perhaps she should have found another way to achieve inner peace and harmony. But every time these thoughts came to her, Nala remembered her former life, filled with emptiness and loneliness. She knew she had to go through these trials to find what she had always been looking for: true love. One day, when Nala was starting to lose hope that someone could see the real her, she met a man who turned her life around. It happened quite unexpectedly, on an ordinary day, when she was strolling through the park, immersed in her thoughts. This man was unlike anyone Nala had ever known before. He didn't pay attention to appearances and didn't judge people by how they looked. He approached her, struck up a conversation, and Nala sensed something unusual. There was no shadow of judgment or admiration in his eyes. He looked at her as if he saw her soul, her real self. They talked about books, about life, about dreams. And although this conversation was quite ordinary, Nala felt that something special was emerging between them. In the days that followed, they began to see each other more and more often. Each time they spent time together, Nala felt that her life began to take on a new meaning. This man saw her not as an object of admiration or an ideal of beauty, but as a person with feelings, thoughts, and experiences. He was interested in her inner world, not her outward appearance. Gradually, Nala began to open up to him. She told him about her fears, about how hard it was for her to go through the changes, about how she suffered from loneliness despite the crowds of admirers around her. He listened to her attentively, not interrupting her, not trying to comfort her with duty words. His attention and understanding became a real source of support and inspiration for Nala. Over time, Nala realized that this man saw the real her. He saw the depth in her that she had tried for so long to show others. And even though her looks were no longer perfect, it didn't matter to him. He valued her for her thoughts, for her sincerity, for her desire to be herself. The relationship between them developed gradually, without fuss or pressure. It wasn't like the fast-paced romances Nala had been used to in the past. Everything happened naturally, as if it were meant to be. They spent a lot of time together, discussing everything from the simplest worldly matters to deep philosophical thoughts. In every conversation, Nala felt that he understood her, that he saw her true nature. This relationship helped Nala to realize that true love does not depend on appearances. She no longer had to hide behind a mask of beauty to be accepted and loved. This man loved her for who she was on the inside, for her soul, for her desire for truth and sincerity. As Nala went through these trials, she realized that her sacrifices were not in vain. Her journey was difficult and full of pain, but in the end it led her to true happiness. She found a man who loved the real her, without masks or covers. He saw in her what she had been trying to show the world for so long, and that love had been a true miracle for Nala. Although her life was no longer as bright and full as it had been, Nala felt truly happy. She had found what she was looking for: true love, which did not depend on appearance, on circumstances, on the opinion of others. This love was based on mutual understanding, respect, and sincerity, and it was the most precious gift Nala had ever received. This relationship helped her find inner peace and harmony. Nala no longer suffered from loneliness and emptiness. She now knew that true beauty lies not in appearance, but in what lies within. And it was this inner beauty that led her to true love, which made her life truly happy and complete. Nala's relationship with Elias blossomed in the weeks that followed. Each day brought them closer together, deepening their connection in ways that she had never experienced before. It was a feeling that went beyond mere attraction. It was as if their souls were intertwined, each finding in the other a sense of completeness that had long been missing. Despite the joy and fulfillment Nala found in her time with Elias, the fears and insecurities that had haunted her were not entirely gone. They lingered in the back of her mind, surfacing in quiet moments when she least expected them. What if this was all just a dream? What if Elias, like so many before him, eventually grew tired of her once he saw the flaws and imperfections she had tried so hard to hide? Elias, however, seemed to sense these doubts. He never pushed her to reveal more than she was comfortable with, but he was always there to listen, to support her, and to reassure her that his feelings for her were genuine. His patience and understanding were like a balm to Nala's wounded heart, helping her to heal in ways she hadn't thought possible. As they spent more time together, Nala began to open up about her past, about the life she had left behind, the transformation she had undergone, and the deep desire for true love that had driven her to make such a drastic change. Elias listened intently, never once judging her or making her feel ashamed of the choices she had made. Instead, he admired her courage and the strength it had taken to break free from the constraints of her old life.
You've been through so much.
Elias said one evening, as they sat together in her apartment, the soft glow of candlelight casting warm shadows on the walls.
But through it all, you never lost sight of who you really are. That's something to be proud of, Nala.
Nala looked into his eyes, her heart swelling with emotion.
I'm not sure I would have been able to do it without you,
she admitted.
You've shown me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to let someone in.
Elias smiled gently and took her hand in his.
You've always had that strength inside you, Nala. I'm just lucky enough to have been able to see it.
Tears welled up in Nala's eyes as she realized how far she had come. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain, doubt, and sacrifice, but in the end, it had all been worth it. She had found someone who loved her for who she truly was, not for the mask she had worn for so long. And in loving Elias, she had also learned to love herself in a way she never had before. But life has a way of testing even the strongest of bonds, and Nala and Elias were no exception. As their relationship grew, so did the challenges they faced. There were moments of tension, times when their differences led to misunderstandings, and times when the scars of Nala's past threatened to pull them apart. Yet, through it all, they remained committed to each other, working through their problems with honesty and open communication. One such challenge came unexpectedly, on a quiet afternoon when Nala was working alone in the bookstore. A customer, an older woman with a kind smile, approached the counter with a book in hand. As Nala rang up the purchase, the woman paused, studying her face with a thoughtful expression. Nala hesitated, a flicker of fear sparking in her chest. She had worked so hard to distance herself from her past, to create a new life where she was known not for her looks but for who she was inside. The last thing she wanted was for someone to recognize her from her former life.
I don't think so.
Nala replied, forcing a smile.
I've been here at the bookstore for a while though, so maybe you've seen me around.
The woman nodded slowly, still scrutinizing her.
Perhaps,
she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced.
there's just something about you that seems so familiar.
Nala's heart raced as she handed the woman her change, hoping the conversation would end there. But as the woman left, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was catching up with her. What if more people recognized her? What if Elias found out about the life she had tried so hard to leave behind? That evening, Nala was unusually quiet as she and Elias prepared dinner together. Elias noticed her unease and gently prodded her to open up.
Is everything okay?
He asked, concern etched in his features. Nala sighed, setting down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables.
Something happened today.
She began, her voice tinged with worry.
It's a customer at the bookstore. She seemed to recognize me. She didn't say anything outright, but I could tell she thought she knew me from somewhere.
Elias looked at her with understanding.
Are you worried that people from your past might start recognizing you?
Nala nodded, her eyes downcast.
I've worked so hard to start over, to build a new life. I'm afraid that if people start recognizing me, it'll all come crashing down. And I don't want you to see me differently because of it.
Elias stepped closer, taking her hands in his.
Nala, your past is a part of who you are, but it doesn't define you. You've made incredible strides to become the person you are today, and nothing can take that away from you. If someone recognizes you, it doesn't change the fact that you built a new life, one that you should be proud of.
Nala looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears.
But what if you see me differently? What if you think less of me because of who I used to be?
Elias shook his head firmly, his gaze unwavering.
I won't. I love you for who you are now, for the strength and courage you've shown in transforming your life. Your past doesn't change that.
The sincerity in his voice, the unwavering support in his eyes, it was enough to dissolve the fear that had been gnawing at Nala. She realized then that Elias truly saw her, all of her, and loved her just the same. In that moment, she understood that the love they shared was stronger than any challenge they might face. The days that followed were filled with a sense of peace and acceptance. Nala no longer feared her past or the possibility of being recognized. She knew that her journey had shaped her into the person she was, and she was proud of the life she had created. With Elias by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. As the seasons changed and the leaves turned golden, Nala and Elias's relationship continued to grow. They spent their days together, exploring the city, sharing quiet moments in the bookstore, and dreaming of the future they would build together. Their love was not without its challenges, but it was rooted in a deep, unwavering commitment to one another. One crisp autumn evening, as they walked hand in hand through a park filled with the vibrant colors of fall, Elias stopped and turned to Nala, his expression serious yet filled with warmth.
Nala,
He began, taking both of her hands in his.
These past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. I've seen you grow and I've seen the strength you carry within you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, facing whatever comes our way, together.
Nala's heart swelled with emotion as she realized what he was about to say. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she squeezed his hands, her voice barely a whisper.
Elias.
Before she could say anything more, Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring that sparkled in the evening light.
Nala, will you marry me?
Nala's breath caught in her throat as she gazed at the ring, then up at Elias's hopeful face. In that moment, everything felt right. All the fear, the doubt, the pain of her past, it all faded away, leaving only love and certainty in its place.
Yes.
She whispered, her voice trembling with emotion.
Yes, I will.
Elias's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the world around them seemed to disappear. In his embrace, Nala felt a sense of belonging, of home, that she had never known before. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Nala realized that her journey had come full circle. She had found the love she had always longed for, a love that was true, deep, and unconditional, and in that love she had found herself. The path she had taken had not been easy. It had been filled with challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. But in the end, it had all led her to this moment, to the life she had always dreamed of. She was no longer defined by her appearance or her past. She was defined by the love she had found and the person she had become. Nala and Elias's journey was just beginning, but they would face it together, hand in hand, their hearts united by a love that saw beyond the surface and touched the very soul.